Grazie mille. Questa parte della discussione sarà fatta in lingua italiana. Va bene? Ecco, perché questo per me è come tornare a casa. For the English people, the English-speaking people, I'll do it in English later. But first, prima facciamo in lingua italiana e vorrei parlare di Niccolò Copernico, perché mi sembra molto importante i 10 anni che ha passato in Italia, fra 1495 e 1506. Perché EAQUALS torna a voi oggi con lo stesso concetto che voi avete dato al mondo. Perché eravate voi che avete dato al mondo il concetto. What I just said was, it's my job to come back to you with what you gave the world. And the same culture. EAQUALS is about peer review, practicing colleagues looking at the work of other practicing colleagues. And you, from the Jagiellonian, gave that technique to the world. So we're bringing it back to its home, which is here in Krakow. And I am, like you, a teacher. Like you, the last 4 weeks have been dramatic in correcting all the exams. I don't know how I am still alive or if I qualify to be alive. I'm going to try and do some of this in Polish, but I don't promise. But I've got a great help here in Mateusz and the others, and we'll see what we can do. Because I am a teacher, I would expect you, as my colleagues, to interrupt me immediately. Something is not 100% clear. Don't worry, don't wait till the end. Ask. I don't see very much. Well, physically I don't see very much, but I do have vision. So if you want to ask a question, just wave, I'll find you. Okay. There you go. I haven't done anything yet. You can clap at the end. Maybe. You won't want to. He said this will work at the end. Okay, first of all, just the background. We were founded in Trieste in 1991 of 10 individuals. They weren't actually associations, there were 10 individuals. Sarah very clearly talked about our mission. My key points are in a different color, and they're the ones that I will talk about after that. We have a unique international accreditation scheme. Accreditation means colleagues, practicing colleagues, observing other practicing colleagues. That's what you taught the world to do. It is your gift to the world. That's all we do. We do not come along and apply standards from above. My colleague who teaches Russian said she knows what her standards are. Our job is to transmit those standards to all the other people who accept the qualification. That's what we have to do as professionals for our students. And Sarah gave you the numbers, nearly 150 members. We started in 10, and our growth has been organic. We never pushed it. We operate in more than 25 languages. I notice, actually, it's very interesting. Here in the JCJ, you guys teach a language that doesn't exist. Now, you tell me here that you teach American. That's what it says, doesn't it? You teach Chinese and you teach American. I'd love to ask you afterwards how you teach American. I studied in America, and we have the misfortune, as Winston Churchill said, to occasionally speak the same language. Only sometimes, of course. Wonderful. They'll throw me out, Monica, afterwards. I point out other things. Council of Europe. Again, we come back to you. I know a little bit about Poland. I know a little bit about your history. I know about your independence. And I was here with you. I have had the privilege of meeting your former president, Lech Wałęsa. He told a joke about me, which I'll share with you afterwards if we have time. The Council of Europe is fundamentally a human rights organization. And do you know what the first human right is that you did not have? For many years in your history, you did not have it. The first human right is the right to have a name. The second one is the right to choose your language to express your ideas. And that's a fundamental right, and EAQUALS defends that right. All languages are equally important because all human beings are equally important. Clear? And we are a recognized member of the Council of Europe. We have participatory status. It sounds wonderful. What it really means is that tons and tons of paper get delivered. And we can talk about it, they ask our opinions about it, and we can't vote. One of the things that we did, my colleague Richard Rossner has done wonderful work on this, is the linguistic integration of adult migrants. This is a big challenge for Poland, as it is for the country in which I live in, which is Italy, which is why I know Italian and why I know something about Niccolò Copernico, because of course he spoke Italian and he wrote in Latin, as you know. And with your colleague from Krakow, Waldek Martyniuk, we are co-founders of the Professional Network Forum, which brings together professionals to discuss professional issues at a European and worldwide level. This is the webpage of the Council of Europe. Don't worry about the detail. Look at the top. This detail is for the electronic portfolio, and the electronic portfolio, which we produced in Trieste, we gave to the world free of charge. And by the way, one of the languages of administration that I put in the electronic portfolio is Latin, just so you know, and I did it 10 years ago. It generates Europass. I have a colleague in the room, and this slide is dedicated to the colleague in the room, wherever she is, but she's waving her hand at me. And I'm going to ask Mateusz to translate this. Acquire new knowledge whilst thinking over the old, and you may become a teacher of others.
Tak, posiądź nową wiedzę, zastanawiając się nad faktami, które już znasz, a możesz zostać nauczycielem innych osób.
Thank you very much. That's dedicated to a colleague who was talking to me in the coffee break. A technical slide. Mateusz, can you come and stand up? I'm going to ask you to be patient and let me do this in 2 or even 3 languages so that we can explain some of the problems that I am like you, I'm a teacher, I also I'm responsible for my institution. This was a problem for me, and EAQUALS helped me debate this problem. Again, to colleagues, maybe you have solved this, but the key issue to remember is that the CEFR B2, for example, is not a level.
Tak, poziom B2 zdefiniowany przez cyfr nie jest jednolitym poziomem.
I love it. This happens to me in Italian. The Italians say 29 words, and the French translator says 4. We just had a beautiful example of that. It's wonderful. You want him, you don't want me, you want him. But the question is this. You don't have levels, you have ranges.
Nie istnieją poziomy, są zakresy, w ramach których mieszczą się różni nasi studenci.
Yeah, and just to do it so I can use my hands, those ranges, as you know very well, colleagues, go like this. Imagine this is the range on A1. A2 is double. B1 is double. I can't do B2, I'm not big enough. It's double. C1 is double, C2 is not. You certified to B2 plus? Good. You're doing the right thing. How do you know? It's evidence-based. How do you know? How do you know? Because they're profiles, they're ranges. If you look at question 1, you'll see that it covers a range. Over to you, Matesh.
Już działa. No więc tak jak widzieliśmy, te poziomy są bardzo niejednolite, jeżeli chodzi o zakres, te zakresy. Poziom A2 jest mniej więcej 2 razy tak szeroko, obejmuje 2 razy tak szeroki zakres umiejętności i różnych poziomów jak poziom A1 i odpowiednio B2, 2 razy tyle co A2 i to już jest za dużo, tego nie da się pokazać w ten sposób, jak tutaj Peter demonstrował. I teraz, jeżeli dajemy certyfikat na poziomie B2+, no to bardzo fajnie, tylko pytanie jest, co to tak naprawdę znaczy, że dajemy certyfikat na poziomie B2+.
Thank you. If you look at question 1, technically at A2, but of course it will also cover A1 and it will also cover B1.
Możemy sobie wyobrazić takie pytanie, które zadamy na poziomie A2 i to pytanie będzie zawierało jakieś elementy z poziomu A1, ale również coś z poziomu B1.
Look at question 2. Theoretically at B1.
Tak, pytanie drugie teoretycznie jest pytaniem z poziomu B1, ale jak widać obejmuje 3 różne poziomy A2, B1 i B2.
And it covers B1 and B2, but it also covers A2. Question. How do you separate the two A2s?
Tak. Pytanie, które się nasuwa, to pytanie, jak oddzielić od siebie te 2 różne poziomy A2.
I found this difficult in my own institution, and it was with the help of colleagues in EAQUALS and the forum that it provided that I started first to discuss it and second to look for answers.
I to pytanie dla mnie było bardzo trudnym pytaniem i zaczęliśmy szukać na nie odpowiedzi w naszej instytucji i zaczęliśmy dopiero w EAQUALS szukać jakichś odpowiedzi na to, jak rozdzielić te poziomy, różne poziomy A2.
It's to do with profiling, and profiling is absolutely essential. Not because somebody has imposed it on us, but because we want our students to have free, open mobility. The generation of your... No, let's do that there, please, Matesh.
Kwestia dotyczy profilowania i profilowanie ma tutaj pełni rolę kluczową i chodzi o to, żeby dać naszym studentom pełną mobilność.
The generation of your vice-rector was not able to travel, he told me, until he was 31. He was 31 years old before he could ever travel.
Pokolenie wicerektora, jak zwierzył się tutaj Peterowi, nie miało możliwości dostępu do podróżowania po świecie do mniej więcej tego okresu, kiedy rektor osiągnął wiek 31 lat.
We want a better future for their generation. I'm being serious.
Dla obecnego pokolenia chcemy lepszej przyszłości.
Look at this. IRT means item response theory. Don't worry about it. Just look at this. Look at, for example, a student who is on the borderline between A2 and B1.
Proszę spojrzeć na ten wykres i nie martwić się skrótem IRT. Mamy na dolnej linii zaznaczonego studenta, który znajduje się pomiędzy poziomami A2 i B1.
And look at another student who is on, I don't know if I can see the borderline, but this student who's on the borderline can, for example, do 80% of the A2, they can achieve 80% of the A2 descriptors.
Student na tym poziomie, ten przykładowy student, potrafi rozwiązać 80% zadań z poziomu A2.
Who established that?
Kto o tym decyduje?
It's not in the CEFR.
Tego nie ma w CEFR-ze.
We do not know.
Nie wiemy.
So, my question is this. I'm going to bring up, I'm trying to do it quickly. There it is. If that person, the same person, can do 80% of A2 and it is not established, the Jagiellonian could easily say, we expect 50% or 75%, but you have to establish it. What process did you use? What evidence can you show? That's the question I ask myself. I don't presume to ask it of you. I asked myself, I said, these were challenges for me.
Jeżeli ten dany student jest w stanie rozwiązać 80% zadań z poziomu A2, to możemy też założyć, że jako Jagiellońskie Centrum Językowe będziemy oczekiwali mniej, czyli na przykład 50 lub 75%. No jest pytanie, jak podjąć taką decyzję, skąd mamy wiedzieć, że to ma być tyle, a nie mniej, a nie więcej.
Remember, every single government, every single member state, all 47 member states of the Council of Europe adopted this, Poland and Russia and the Czech Republic and Bulgaria and France and Germany, but also Japan, China, now the United States, Canada. They adopted this and these levels unanimously.
Te poziomy zostały jednogłośnie przyjęte przez wszystkie kraje członkowskie Rady Europy, w sumie 47 tych krajów, ale również przez kraje takie jak Japonia czy Stany Zjednoczone.
So how do you know that your B2 is the same between colleague and colleague, between language and language, between department and department, across the university? How do you know? And I'm sure you have answers. But for me that was difficult and I needed help and I found the answers. I can demonstrate how I do it in Trieste. I know the validity of my diplomas. And I know because my peers, my colleagues came and checked. That's how I know. And I have the evidence, they tell me, that can be provided and is provided. And the diplomas are accepted by governments all over the world.
Skąd mamy pewność, że moje B2 jest takie samo jak B2 kolegi na mojej uczelni, czy w innej instytucji, czy w innym kraju? Nie mamy takiej pewności. Ja mam taką pewność, ponieważ moje dyplomy zostały sprawdzone przez innych kolegów po fachu, specjalistów i wiem, że dyplom, który daję, oznacza naprawdę poziom B2.
How do you know that the French department is applying perhaps 80% and the English department perhaps 60% or vice versa?
Skąd wiadomo, czy na przykład dział języków, języka francuskiego, Wydział Francuski nie stosuje zasady, że na przykład 80% deskryptorów na danym poziomie jest koniecznych do zaliczenia, a z kolei angielski 60 lub mniej.
And I found that difficult. And I'm good at what I do. And I needed help. And the forum for that was EAQUALS.
To było dla mnie trudne, a jestem dobry w tym, co robię. I znalezieniem odpowiedzi dla mnie odpowiedź znalazła się właśnie na forum, którym jest EAQUALS.
And a final consideration, because it is not in the common European framework. You have to establish it. If a student at 8.2 can do 80%, question, how much of B1 can they do?
Tak, i ostatnie pytanie. Jeżeli student radzi sobie z 80% zadań na poziomie A2, to z jakim procentem zadań na poziomie B1 sobie poradzi? Tej odpowiedzi nie znajdziemy w skali cyfr.
Keep going and answer the question there, Mateusz. Go on, keep going, 50%. Go on. Keep doing it in Polish. Go on, you can do it. He can. And A1, go on.
No tak, jeżeli ktoś potrafi zrobić 100% zadań na poziomie A1, no to ile potrafi zadań zrobić z poziomu A2 i B1?
And B2?
Tak. Jak widać, to nie jest tak, że jeżeli ktoś jest na poziomie A1, no to nie będzie potrafił zrobić nic z poziomu B1 lub B2.
A C1? %. Okay? It's 5%. And C2, well, it's negligible. This is the same student. This is the same student in the same test.
Mówimy cały czas o tym samym studencie i o tym samym teście.
That's how it works. So you need processes together to establish. Otherwise, the risk is you will be doing different things. And the modern world for your students says, I have to demonstrate on evidence. I cannot say now, and I do understand what you said, but I cannot any longer say, I know my standards. I have to say, I know my standards, and I can show you. That's all it is, that I can show you. That's all you have to do. It's not very threatening, but it isn't easy, because if it was easy, we'd do it ourselves. But it's not easy. It's challenging, but it is not being imposed on top. It's being demanded by our learners, and they are our employers. They employ us, our learners. Translate that if you can do it and get out alive.
Thank you. No więc Pytanie jest takie, skąd wiemy, że te poziomy są jednakowe, i jest to takie wyzwanie, żeby ustalić, jak to jest, że te nasze poziomy są różne. I teraz zatrudniają nas nasi studenci i oni potrzebują tego, by te nasze poziomy, i certyfikaty, które dajemy, rzeczywiście oznaczały rzeczy, które można ze sobą porównywać. I to jest nasz obowiązek wobec nich, żeby im taką usługę dostarczyć.
That's it. Great. Okay, that's the technical bit, but just to give you some, because I'm a teacher, I tried to anticipate your questions. And I got some of them right, not all of them, but I got some of them right. These are some of the projects that EAQUALS is delivering this year. I would just say two things. The ISO projects, which are being run by the Chinese, it's the Chinese government who's pushed for this, will affect you, although they do not apply to you, because the private sector schools will have to come up in their standards. So the challenge for you is to increase and improve your standards. I'm just going to look at 2 or 3 things quickly. One is the need for quality guidelines, not commandments, not thou shalt or thou shalt not. Does that make sense? All right. Well, it makes sense to him. But that we are looking for cross-border mobility. What mechanisms do we need to put in place in our curriculum to ensure that our students have that? That we are looking for transparency. That's the problem with your question. I understand what you are saying, but how do you show transparency if you say only the first part of the sentence and not the second? It's a question. And of course, why do we not like ISO so much? Because there's no recommendations for international dealings. We are about the Jagiellonian has always, throughout its 650 wonderful years, been about international dealings. Nor is there any requirement to look at what we do, teachers. How can you put a quality standard and not look at what we do, for heaven's sake? This won't work. I knew it wouldn't. Let's go back. There it does. One of the things in there which is going to be interesting and helps move things forward is how do we develop staff? What is the infrastructure that staff need? What equipment? What rooms? What other things do we need to be able to operate? I think that might be useful for you. By the way, I wrote these slides about 6 weeks ago. You'll see why I say that now. A reflection. Here you go. Now, let me do this first. So, the greatest explorers are not those who discover new countries, but see things with new eyes. You revisit what you're doing. You do not throw it away. You do not deny the past. You do not say, well, everything's rubbish, change it. You look again with new eyes. And as one who cannot see, I understand that very well. I see a bit, but I don't see very well. Translate that.
Największymi odkrywcami nie są ci, którzy odkrywają nowe kraje, lecz ci, którzy patrzą na znane rzeczy nowymi oczami.
Thank you. So, the 2 projects I'd like to look at, which I think will help you enormously, one is the core inventory, and the key about this is that one of the co-authors of the Common European Framework, Brian North, and you'll sure have heard that name, produced this document. We'll look at it at another time in its objectives, but if you look at the purple color, it says the inventory maps, so it maps it over. the communality of interpretation. How did publishers, exam boards, other universities, by the way, for the lady who asked us, we have 5 university centers, language centers, as well as other universities. How did they interpret this? What can we learn from them? In terms of general English, and here's scope for you, in terms of curriculum, because the CFR does not tell us anything about curriculum. So where do we begin? And this helps you begin. Young adults means the people like university-age students, so from 18 to 28, and roughly this is your age range.
Nie wiemy tak naprawdę, co oznacza skala cyfr w praktyce, jeżeli chodzi o program nauczania. I teraz jak przełożyć tę skalę cyfr na konkretne kursy, no to jest pytanie.
The core inventory looks at curriculum, the domains, those are the context areas, the exponents and the competencies, that's, if you like, the grammar and the lexis and how that is then incorporated. It looks at tasks, it's task-oriented because it's and it looks at assessment and final certification. This helps you start work on curriculum if you have not already done it. And it helps you do it so you don't have to restart from zero. You can start from here. And this is free. We gave it to the world. Here's an example of a scenario. This scenario, rated at B1, is for an online forum. You can't see the detail, but it actually goes into all the language details that I was showing you in that diagram before. And here's the list of all the scenarios and how you can implement scenarios with all the components. It's all there, it's all in the thing, it's all on the website. But I thought it through the other way around. Instead of putting the core inventory in the center, suppose we put scenarios in the center. And suppose we link language exponents to scenarios. Could we then have more accurate assessment systems? And how might they work? Here's an example of one, again produced by a group that was coordinated by Brian North, and we have a colleague called Glyn Jones who will be looking at this and delivering towards the end of 2013 or 2014? This November. So November 2013, and here's an example, because you see it's relatively easy, and we know it's already complicated, it's relatively easy to assess production. It's relatively easy to assess spoken production. It is relatively easy to assess written production. How on earth do you do it for listening and for reading, particularly those languages that only have reading? Because the process, the intellectual, cognitive process, is hidden from you. And actually, this concept of scenarios, we think, will take us into the next phase of language teaching. So keep an eye on this. This is going to take us into the future. The other thing, quickly, and we will finish on time, is something called the European Profiling Grid, EPG. This is an equals idea, started in 2005. It's a European consortium now, guided by the Goethe Institute, for 5 languages initially, but then for a further, we hope, 11, but 5 initially. It will be published in October this year, and you are the first people ever to see the final bit. We can't leave it with you because it has not been published yet. You see it in English, but of course it will be available in French, in German, in Spanish, in Italian, and then we will add the other languages. What is it? Well, before I do that, OECD, I don't know what the Polish for OECD, the European Organization, do you know? He does, he knows it. Hey,
OECD.
Even I could have done that. Okay, but what I would like you to do is translate the first sentence. The quality of the teaching workforce is a major consideration in any nation's aspirations for an educational system of high quality.
Jakość pracowników sektora kształcenia ma decydujące znaczenie dla aspiracji jakiejkolwiek nacji, jeżeli chodzi o wysoki standard nauczania.
Thank you. So EPG, European Profiling Grid, this relates back. So we wanted a concise description of the main language teaching. So before, with the portfolio, the electronic portfolio, which was for learners, we now take that concept forward for teachers, us, you and me. So it's a tool for teacher self-assessment, because to be a good language teacher, maybe to be a good teacher anyway, you need that high degree of self-motivation and self-reflection. Then we have to communicate it amongst colleagues. And we want to look at what are or what should be the teaching competences of senior teachers like yourselves. That then tells us what we may need for the future in terms of training and support. How we can then go back to our vice-rector and say, yes, we want to do this, but we need this support. And we can show you how we came to that conclusion. Just one thing, the word harmonization has been used. Harmonization very often does mean imposing standards from the top. This doesn't. This is not about getting everybody to do the same thing. This is about teachers being given a tool to be able to look at their profile. We tested it. Those numbers are self-explanatory and they're in your handouts. But when EAQUALS tests, it tests. And look at some of those numbers. I mean, just to think, we handled this test in 70 countries. That's impressive. Applying the principles means language learning objectives. And of course, an accreditation system by practicing colleagues comes and sees how those are being applied. Are they working? And you have to do this in the real world, for real people. And we have to be able to state clearly what the learners will be able to do. And we have to say to what degree and how much they will be able to do. So we have to bring these notions together in syllabuses. And from that, we then need lesson plans. That's how we do it. That's the mechanism. There is no other way that we know of at the moment. Maybe in future we'll find other ways. And the key to this is understanding our learners. We are here to serve them. We are here to provide things for our learners. And we have to ensure, that means guarantee, that things are done in a meaningful and communicative manner, and that learners too can monitor their own process. And if learners can monitor their own progress, not assess, not give themselves certificates, they need you and your skills to do that. But if learners can monitor and self-assess, then why on earth can't we monitor and self-assess? And the answer is, well, of course we can. We just need the tools. But remember, the tools are not enough without the big picture. So I'm trying to give you the big picture and one or two of the tools. Remember, the same tools can make a tractor, they can make a double-decker bus, they can make a Ferrari, they can make a terrorist bomb. So what I'm interested in is coming from Italy, I'm interested in the Ferraris, but at least we know what we are trying to do with the tools. Who's the EPG for? Language teachers, first of all. Then the managers, Then the teacher trainers. Where's the teacher training come in? How should it be organized? With what topics? And I'm going to show you how you can bring all the colleagues together. End users we're not going to look at. Who could be the groups of users? Well, all the individuals are down on the left-hand side. Number 3 is language departments at universities. Please notice that ministries of education are rather nearer the bottom. Don't tell them. Keep it a secret. Say nothing. How does it work in terms of experience? Well, you know, I'm sure this is your life, that you've been up these steps. But experience as a mentor or a trainer is only, in the end, as a product of in-service courses, which is, in the end, only the product of reading groups. So it's a cascade down to progress up. And it needs organization. You can't just leave it. The EPG is organized like the framework itself in levels and, oh sorry, that's really important. It's organized in levels, and so and we call them phases. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and each one subdivided. This is important. The principle behind, and this, by the way, is Jean Piaget, who over 100 years ago, who first produced this. So we acknowledge the French culture in this, to review teacher competences from a positive perspective. We don't need people to come along and tell us what we can't do. We know that. We know the truth. We need people to come along and show us how to do better. That's what we need. To be shown alternatives. We're not an orthodoxy, we are heterodox. And of course, it's got to be action-oriented. So what are the areas? Well, qualifications and experience is the obvious one. Key teaching competences, it's the only one I have time to look at in detail, and I only have 5 minutes for that. Enabling competences and professionalism, and each one divided into these 3 development phases. In each development phase, so as the teacher progresses in their experience and hopefully career. We're going to look at key teaching ones. So one of the key teaching competences is methodology. Look at phase 3, but not 3.2, the top, 3.1. Can provide theoretical justification for the teaching approach being used and for a very wide range of techniques and materials. Not because you've been given them, but because you've generated them. Look at lesson and course planning. The middle, the low one. Can use a syllabus and specified materials to prepare lesson plans that are balanced and meet the needs of the group. Can plan phases. Can compare learners' needs and refer to these in planning. That's 2. It's not 3. Interaction management. Did anybody, how many of you have ever been, I don't want you to put your hands up, I just want you to tell yourselves. How many of you have been on training courses for interaction management? Answer the question yourselves. Can set up task-based learning in which groups carry out different activities at the same time. Can monitor individual and group performances. Assessment. Can use video recordings of learners' interactions to help them recognize. By the way, this is all the cultural agencies, the British Council, Goethe Institute, Instituto Cervantes, Instituto Camões, CIEP, all these, and they're all members of EAQUALS. Establishing this. The ones I've just been down are the key teaching. You remember before it was yellow and going across horizontally, now looking vertically, key teaching competences, and you've got methodology, lesson and course planning, interaction management, assessment. Those can be done cross and interdepartmentally. It is not specific to English or to French or to German. Look, enabling intercultural competence. Major competence needed. Language awareness, digital media. Look across, professionalism. Look the other way, and you've got the more obvious ones of language proficiency, education and training, assessed teaching. That's an interesting one. Assessed teaching, by whom? Not inspection, assessed. Colleague watching you work and discussing it afterwards. Then you watching the colleague work and discussing it afterwards. It is not anathema. And of course, you don't get a straight line, you get profiles, just like the learner B1, B2 profiles. Here is, for example, an example of a native speaker assessing their language competence at 3.2, but if you look at intercultural competence, she was very, very honest and assessed herself at only 2.1. She felt she needed more help, more guidance, more training, more observation, more input to become more proficient at that. I think that's wonderful, just wonderful. Nobody told her, she told us. She told us. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Of course, you can't summarize our experience in a grid. It would be ridiculous. Of course, there are things off the grid, and these are only some of them. I draw your attention, for example, to learner satisfaction, learning outcomes that Sarah talked about so clearly this morning, learner development. Look at our ability to innovate, our ability to be creative. You can't confine that into some intellectual gulag. And the characteristics, well, there they are, but look at the blue or the purple one, a tool that is creative and can be adapted and developed by you, I would suggest, because you can. There's going to be an electronic version of that. That's available in October. It'll be available from, it's in your handout, I think. And here's a proposal for I don't know if am I allowed to make proposals to the Jagiellonian? Am I? I don't know. I think there's a role for you. I think you could make a wonderful contribution. Not some of you, all of you. I think you can bring your knowledge, your experience, your expertise into talking about additional, what extra competencies do we need to be able to teach at tertiary level? What about degree programs? What about our postgraduate students? We don't need the same. We need additional competencies. They need describing clearly. You could make a major contribution to world modern language teaching. Not just, this is world. And I think it's I don't know who I make this proposal to, but take it somewhere. And then they say, no, it's irrelevant. But it isn't irrelevant. And you can do it. You've got to. And I go back and I finish with the reflection. Again, for my friend at the top. And all her colleagues this time. By 3 methods we may learn from wisdom. Let's do it line by line.
Na 3 sposoby możemy zdobyć mądrość. Pierwszy.
Yeah, thank you. First by reflection, which is the noblest.
Pierwszym sposobem jest zastanowienie się i przemyślenia własne, które jest najszlachetniejszym.
Okay. Second by imitation, which is the easiest.
Następnie przez naśladownictwo, które jest najprostsze.
And third by experience, which is the bitterest.
I trzecim sposobem jest przez zdobywanie doświadczenia, które jest najbardziej gorzkie.
So, what can we bring to you? Bill Gates changed my slide. I had written the lowercase e, the e of Euler, taken to the power of 4. Bill Gates removed the power and put a capital E. Thank you, Bill. But you can imagine. Remember, though, equals is not about imposing clones all identical. It is about the equivalency of professionalism, and we used the mathematical notational symbol of equivalency. where each culture is recognized and accepted as equal to any other culture. What can equals bring? E, and by the way, this isn't E plus E plus E. These are multipliers. It's E to the power of 4. We can bring expertise, but not top down, because you can give expertise back, and I'm suggesting you can make a major contribution through the European profiling grid, if you wish, and apply for European funding. But talk to equals about it. We can bring experience, vast experience, but so can you. We can bring encouragement, because I too am inspected, and I too am a teacher. And by the way, because I'm the founder chair, they make it tougher on me than anybody else. You will never get an inspection like I get, believe me, never ever. So we can give you encouragement, and I hope, if nothing else, we can just transmit the sheer love of being a teacher. People don't understand what we do. People don't always appreciate it. People don't always listen to us. We don't always get paid as much as perhaps we should. But we do it. And we do it for whatever crazy reason we do it. And I think that Equals has that in it, that it has the enthusiasm and the courage to look at things. And why did I use, and I finish actually in 41 minutes. I did it pretty well, how about that? Why the Greek culture? Why so many references to Greece? Well, the reference is this, that Greece has suffered terribly, as you know, because of the economic recession. And if you think that Europe is going to be created by the bureaucrats of Brussels or the European Central Bank, then I think you might be wrong. So who is going to create Europe? You are. You. Because you teach young people how to use words, and with those words, they then take their knowledge all over the world. And you, the language teachers, are the key to this operation. So I use a Greek poet to remind us of this, in honor of the Greeks who've had such a hard time. A Greek poet, a Nobel Prize winner, a man whom, when the regime of the colonels threw him into prison without a trial, you've never heard anything like that before in your history, with no appeal, locked up. In 3 weeks, the Greek people rose and removed the colonels after 27 years of dictatorship. And I think a people who care enough about their poets are people to be respected, I think. So this poem is from the Greek poet George Seferis, translated into English, ma potrei anche fare in lingua italiana, se vogliamo, solo per sottolineare. It's called Pine Trees. Just give them the word pine trees.
Sosny.
There you go. As pine trees hold the wind's imprint. Difficult. Had no problem. He's just seeing it live.
Niosą w sobie szum wiatru.
Okay. After the wind is gone, is no longer there.
Gdy wiatr ucichnie, nastaje cisza.
Remember your translation there. So, words. My message for you, because you are the experts in words. You are the maestri. Copernicus described himself as maestro at the University of Ferrara when he acknowledged his maestro, Professor Antonin. And the original of that is in your museum. So, words.
Tak też słowa.
retain a man's imprint.
Zachowują w sobie charakter człowieka. Gdy człowieka już nie ma,
After the man is gone, is no longer there. That's what you give your students. The belief and the knowledge and the power to use words to express their knowledge to other people. That is not an ignoble thing to do. Thank you. Finished.
Hello. First, I'd like to say that I do appreciate the appreciation you show for our concerns and understanding. I think most of us really liked what you said. When I was thinking about the concerns we expressed here and the questions, I thought that maybe we are a bit like one of the Marx brothers, Groucho Marx, who said, I don't want to belong to a club where they want me as a member. But that was the beginning because we didn't really know about equals. And now that we know more, I guess we want to be a member more. But one more word about our concerns. We are not just a language school. We teach at university and we want to believe that we can enjoy the best of both worlds. So we know the framework standards, but at the same time we enjoy a fair amount of independence here, right? So we, it may happen that because we teach languages in disciplines, it may happen that in our courses, for example, in course B2, we work with texts which are, well, C2, right, because they are real texts from disciplines. And that is not standardized, that is not really controlled. We make choices together with our students, we have projects. So maybe there are some concerns about the level of independence that we may be, you know, well, given here. So that's one problem.
Tak, nie jesteśmy tylko szkołą językową, ale uczymy specjalistycznego języka i stąd wynika problem taki, że czasami na poziomie B1 dajemy studentom specjalistyczne teksty, które są z poziomem skomplikowania na dużo wyższym, stoją na dużo wyższym poziomie skomplikowania niż poziom B1. I bardzo trudno jakby kontrolować i dostosowywać te teksty do poziomu studentów i na niższych, w grupach B1 na przykład.
First of all, thank you for the kind words. I know exactly what you mean about Groucho Marx. Afterwards, I'll give you another quotation back from him, but perhaps not publicly. I teach in the Faculty of Law. My institute actually certifies the Faculty of Law at the University of Trieste. And like you, we have to deal with very complex, high-level texts, which we can't choose. The key issue is, how do we communicate to the certificate user and to colleagues what we are doing in a meaningful way? What meta-language can we use so that everybody understands what? So it isn't that we lose our autonomy. God help us. I've spent all my life fighting for autonomy without going to how or why. And so it's about how we communicate that across our department, that what you're doing is communicated in the same way as, so we don't get one person saying one thing but meaning something very different. And that's the challenge that I think you face as content deliverers. And that is a major challenge. But it is typical of all universities. It's not just what you do.
Tak, sam również prowadzę kursy na Wydziale Prawa i stąd teksty, których używamy na tym wydziale, również są bardzo skomplikowane. No i jest to ogólnie problem, żeby te teksty odpowiadały poziomowi grupy. Ale kwestia dotyczy również tego, jak komunikujemy się z innymi pracownikami i w jaki sposób opisujemy. Potrzebny jest metajęzyk, który pozwoli opisać to, co robimy i ujednolicić ten poziom tak, żeby ten certyfikat, który dajemy, rzeczywiście odpowiadał danemu konkretnemu poziomowi językowemu.
I think that as an inspector, and I am an inspector as well, that we talk about standards, but standards don't mean standardization, that everybody would be the same. I think that when we talk about standards, it is about effectiveness in your context. And I can't say that too strongly enough, that we have very diverse members teaching in very diverse contexts. So our scheme is very much about respecting individual approaches as long as they can be evidenced as effective. And I think, this reinforcement that Peter gave about evidence, it's about the evidence you bring to the effectiveness of that method. It needs to be described publicly to the learners, publicly to the people who are going to read the certificates. And that's our job as the inspection scheme, is that first of all you have to describe them to us. But it's about stating publicly what you are doing and why, and then that's what we would look at, and that's what we would assess you against. So we would expect differences in approach across this institution, but a common theme of how your beliefs about language learning, I suppose, and your objectives would be common at institutional level, with differences in terms of the specialities you deliver. So you're quite a complex organisation. So yes, I don't want to keep interrupting.
Okay, so thank you very much for this explanation. Well, the last thing is that my reflection is that there is a lot for us to learn about communication and this publicity that you are talking about. That's something that we are not used to doing. And maybe this is the reason why we had a few doubts and concerns. There will be a few new things to learn. So thank you very much. Okay.
Pewnie ten aspekt właśnie informacji, udzielania informacji jest czymś, czego nie robimy i to pewnie jest dla nas taką nowością i tutaj pewnie będziemy mieli kilka wątpliwości. Dziękujemy za odpowiedź.
Ja się postaram tylko przypomnieć to, co Sara powiedziała. Sara w odpowiedzi na te wątpliwości Dominiki powiedziała oczywiście, że ponieważ sama też jest inspektorem EAQUALS i ma doświadczenie w wizytowaniu wielu różnych instytucji, również uniwersytetów i świadoma jest różnic i konkretnych kontekstów nauczania języka i tutaj najważniejsza jest efektywność, więc jeżeli jest metoda i efektywność, uzyska się konkretny cel, to jest najważniejsze. Więc tutaj nie ma żadnych standardów, które są narzucane z góry, prawda? Tylko że chodzi o efektywność metody i uzyskanie konkretnego celu, tak? Więc tutaj nie ma obaw, jeżeli chodzi o standardy, które nie będą nam narzucane z góry.
Jeżeli mamy być oceniani według jakichś standardów, czy te standardy będą nam pokazane, czy my możemy się z tymi standardami zapoznać? To jest tak, jak my oceniamy studentów i oni wiedzą, powinni wiedzieć, co podlega ocenie. Także dla nas to jest bardzo ważne, a z tego, co zrozumiałam, jest inaczej. To my powinniśmy pokazać to, co my sobą, to, co my wprowadzamy i jak bardzo efektywni jesteśmy. Czy to mogłabym uzyskać odpowiedź?
Thank you very much for that actually very, very important and perceptive comment. The three very short answers. One, of course you need to know what the standards and the system are. And in fact, your organization sort of jumped into an advisory visit before the self-assessment stage was carried out. All our standards and all our documentation are public documents. That's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is, who's we? Because when you say we, if you mean as teachers, well, no, we are not being assessed as teachers. It is the whole organization. It is a holistic approach. And so that people are looking at what the teachers are doing and how that matches to the stated curriculum of the organization. And that's what they're doing. And all of those standards and everything is in a public document. And the final thing is, when the reporting stage comes along, there is no reference to me or you or you. It's how teachers generally apply the stated curriculum and whether or not those stated objectives appear to being achieved. Does that make sense to you?
Okej. No więc kwestie są następujące. W ogóle dziękuję bardzo za to pytanie. Pierwsza kwestia jest taka, że te standardy są dostępne publicznie, więc one wszystkie są opisane i można je sobie przeczytać. A druga kwestia jest taka, że jak rozumiemy zaimek my, czy my to jesteśmy poszczególne osoby, czy to jest nasza organizacja i tutaj w akredytacji EAQUALS chodzi o całą organizację i to jak dana instytucja wprowadza standardy i realizuje założone przez siebie cele.
And what you're looking at could easily be a 2-year or more project which would start with, at institute level, with what are our stated generalized objectives. You do make statements on your website. They are there. You do state your objectives to B2+, and I read them yesterday. They're only in Polish, but they're there. I would strongly recommend you translate your JCJ website, by the way. I think you do need to have it in other languages because you need to attract international students. I do think that's something you need to do, if I can say that to you. But the issue is, as you have publicly stated, you are delivering to B2 and B2+. And where B2+ can be demonstrated, you will certify to B2. That already is making statements about what you do. So you need to, as an organization, think, how do we provide the evidence for that? And how do I know that what I do, what do you teach? So that what you're teaching in English is comparable to what your colleague is teaching in French. Because your institute is making a statement for all of you. And you've got to be able to deliver it because the organizations who receive it know how to judge. And if you get one student from the Jagiellonian theoretically at the same level, and one performs here and one performs here, well, that's a problem. And you live in an internationalized world. So EAQUALS helps you by not looking at you as an individual, but by looking at JCJ overall, of which you are perhaps the most important part.
Tak, patrzymy na całą instytucję, a nie na poszczególnych pracowników i Jagiellońskie Centrum Językowe na swojej stronie internetowej, która niestety dostępna jest tylko w języku polskim i Peter tutaj sugeruje, że powinniśmy jak najszybciej przetłumaczyć na inne języki. That will soon happen. The website will soon be translated. Zobowiązaliśmy się, umieszczając tam informację, że prowadzimy kursy zakończone egzaminami na poziomie B2 i B2+. Jeżeli takie stwierdzenie pada z naszych ust, to powinniśmy wiedzieć, co to tak naprawdę oznacza. I poziom B2 dla języka angielskiego powinien odpowiadać poziomowi B2 dla języka, załóżmy, francuskiego lub innego. I ponieważ w świecie międzynarodowym te standardy muszą sobie odpowiadać.
I'm going to ask practical or a down-to-earth or a funny question. And I need to provide a context for the question. Namely, we're going to confront the task when we have to teach English for specific purposes. So we'll have to design syllabuses, etc., to teach, for example, English for chemistry students or history students. And my question is, if I'm able to justify my methods and the techniques I'm using on my course, and still they don't prove effective in terms that my students are not performing the way I would like them to, will I find advice from EAQUALS? Of course, I know that it is not individual assessment or individual advice, etc., the thing that you've been stressing all the time. Yet, my question is practical. Will I profit from EAQUALS in this sense that I will be given advice, or I will find advice somewhere in your documents, in your papers, what to do to make myself more effective? However, I've used all my expertise, all my experience, pretty long. I believe in my methods, believe in my techniques, yet I still feel my students are not doing, in the end, what I wanted them to do. That's my question. I'm exposing myself to laughter, perhaps.
Okay. Więc pytanie dotyczy kursów specjalistycznych. Czy tworząc takie kursy specjalistyczne i będąc w stanie uzasadnić, dlaczego używamy konkretnych materiałów i konkretnych technik, nadal mamy problemy z doprowadzeniem studentów do odpowiedniego poziomu oczekiwanego. Czy w takiej sytuacji uzyskamy pomoc od EAQUALS w kwestii tego, jak to zrobić, żeby ci studenci osiągali ten poziom, który jest założony odgórnie?
The quick answer and the easy answer is yes, but I'd like to qualify it, because what we would like to do, and what we do always, is to try and make sure that within each organization there is the forum for that sort of question to be raised, answered, addressed within the organization. Because obviously if you are reliant on an external organization, they've got the answers for it, and of course we hold workshops, of course we hold teacher training sessions, of course we sit down and we do actually have some documentation on the, we have a huge amount of documentation, but the issue is not reading the manual, the issue is reflection. The issue is, and you've done this actually very, very well by bringing all the teachers together. And it's a brilliant thing to have done, because very, very often we go in, and I'm sure Sarah will share this, very often we go in and talk about to the academic managers, and only much, much later do we see the teachers. And my plea was a plea for reflection. We need to reflect on what we are doing and to raise these questions. And one of the things that needs to be done in all organizations, because I do what you do. I do exactly what you do. And I'm responsible for, and what I showed you on the slides were problems I faced that I couldn't handle on my own. I was being quite honest with you about my own limitations. But of course, what you need to be able to do is to be able to raise that in a training context so that interdisciplinary training takes place, because you can be sure you are not the only person with those concerns. And that's how a mechanism that helps you dialogue about, we need this sort of training. I would like to achieve this. How do I do it? You need systems for that, I would suggest.
No więc odpowiedź brzmi tak, chociaż z pewnym zastrzeżeniem, ponieważ tak naprawdę nie chodzi o to, żeby przeczytać sobie podręcznik, w którym te odpowiedzi zostaną podane na tacy, tylko bardziej o wypracowanie takich odpowiedzi wewnątrz danej organizacji, ponieważ nie chodzi o importowanie rozwiązań zewnętrznych, tylko zebranie się w ramach instytucji, jaką jest JCJ i wypracowanie takich technik, które pozwolą na rozwiązanie tych problemów. W ramach EAQUALS działają fora, na których również prowadzone są dyskusje, są prowadzone warsztaty różnego rodzaju, ale w gruncie rzeczy pierwszym podstawowym zadaniem jest zastanowienie się nad tym, co robimy i jak to robimy. I pierwszym krokiem, który tutaj został wykonany, jest właśnie zebranie się tutaj wspólnie wszystkich nauczycieli i wspólna dyskusja na ten temat.
I think that one of the key opportunities is just the opportunity for peer. We are talking about peer accreditation, but you see, before that, there's the step of peer observation, that you have the opportunity to go and look at what a colleague is doing, invite a colleague in to look at what you're doing, possibly from a different language department, and discuss it together. There are lots of mechanisms, including using the portfolio in Polish, where you as teachers can work together. And I think that's part of the process too. But the simple answer is yes, EAQUALS can, but wouldn't it be great if you could do it here? That's the real answer.
No więc EAQUALS może udzielać takich informacji i takich porad, ale lepiej by było, gdybyśmy potrafili znaleźć sami na to odpowiedź.
Ja mam jedno pytanie, Peter, praktyczne pytanie, okay, if I may. Pytanie jest takie, właśnie gdzie w takim razie, jak jesteśmy tu i teraz, jak my mamy zacząć? How to start? Okay, where to start and what to do on practical side? Okay, that would be my question. I'm sorry for like the practicalities, but this is what teachers are interested in most. Thank you.
Yes, I think that we don't think that EAQUALS will either inspect you to death or be able to answer all the issues you have. Our role is to assist in partnership, to share things with you. Our accreditation is a sharing and to give you opportunities of ideas of development. We're not so close a partner, we'll do the work for you. We'll make suggestions of how you as an institution can achieve what you want to achieve. And I think that in terms of a practical tool for seeing how that works, that looking at the self-assessment document now could be very helpful because it will aid reflection, it will aid sharing of practice across disciplines and across departments. And this would be the way to start the dialogue in your teams, I think. So I think that's something to in some senses you've stepped quickly to a halfway mark, but perhaps need to step back a little bit now with the feedback and start to think for yourselves about using the self-assessment, which you'll find when you look at it is very reflective and very simple statements about, you know, how do you do this? And you look at the question and then you answer it in your group. So it's a very practical, down-to-earth document that you can use for discussion. And I think working through that, you'll probably learn things about yourselves and start to be able to make the public statements which give evidence for your approach. And so it's hard to describe that now, so I'll stop talking, but that's the kind of practical tool that you could use rather than us we're not going to come in and do that for you. It's about giving you the tools to start doing it yourselves, really.
Więc Sara tutaj Powiedziała, że jeżeli oczekujemy, że nas inspektorzy będą odwiedzać i wykończą nas inspekcjami, to się mylimy, więc co EAQUALS nam może zaoferować i do czego nas zachęci, to do pewnej refleksji i do użycia właśnie tego formularza samooceny, aby popatrzeć na swoją instytucję troszeczkę z zewnątrz, tak jak patrzymy właśnie na siebie w lustrze, żeby jak gdyby popatrzeć na nią i zobaczyć dobre i złe strony i po prostu postarać się współpracować ze sobą, tak żeby wypracować jakąś jedną platformę i kiedy będziemy publicznie wychodzić z pewnymi twierdzeniami, żeby to były jakieś twierdzenia, które są oparte jak gdyby już na wypracowane przez instytucje współdziałające, czy to będą grupy lektorów, czy to będą też poszczególne grupy językowe współdziałające ze sobą, żebyśmy mogli po prostu sami najpierw coś wypracować, zanim jak gdyby będziemy oczekiwali tutaj, oczywiście też oni też służą pomocą w tym procesie.
Sarah very nicely has answered most of the question that Monica raised. I think the one modification I would like to say, where do we start? What I would suggest is, if you can organize this, take the Polish version of the portfolio. On an A4 sheet of paper, photocopy, yes, you're going to need to take notes, good man. On an A4 sheet of paper, photocopy the portfolio for learners with the descriptors taken out, blank, just the lines, blank. So it's got the 5 skills, the levels, A1, A2, B1, B2, etc., and blank. And groups of teachers from different languages. It is really important you get together a Latin teacher with a German teacher, a Russian teacher with an English teacher, etc. Different languages. And the descriptors you cut up into little squares like cards. And you jumble them up. And all you have to do together in groups of teachers to start this, before you look at the profiling grid, is create the Common European Framework from the descriptors you have in front of you, and you do it in Polish. And that has fantastic potential, because you'll soon find out that you have the discussion, no, I think that one is C1. Well, wait a minute, and you start the debate of what's C1 and what's C, and if all of you get it all right, particularly C2, I promise I'm going to come back here with a barrel of champagne and hand it over to you, because there's no way you will. And that teaches you lots of things about the Common European, and it's a wonderful dialogue. And then when you've done that, does that make sense? And then you turn over and then you check. Here are the answers. Why is that like that? That doesn't make sense. But you do it across the languages. When you've done that exercise, then you get onto the European profiling grid, and we will make sure that as soon as it is published, we will get you it to you as quickly as possible, so that you have. And that process, the one that Sarah described, and if I may, preceded by that simple work in Polish, and you will see the debate that generates, and that will be enormously helpful. And that's a good point, I would suggest, in practical terms, to start. That debate, we didn't do it like that. There's no rights and wrongs, there's no marks. It generates the debate of why that level is like that, and does it make sense in my language when I'm teaching Chinese and your language when you're teaching Norwegian? Because yes, we have the descriptors for all of them. And that's the place I would suggest that you could start. I was going to say tomorrow morning, how about have a holiday and start in September? But I think you could do that pretty quickly. I really do.
Gdzie można zacząć? No, odpowiedź jest taka, że trzeba wziąć sobie portfolio w tłumaczeniu polskim i pociąć sobie to portfolio, wyciąć z niego deskryptory i rozpocząć dyskusję w grupach mieszanych, to znaczy nauczycieli różnych języków, czyli nauczycieli na przykład łaciny, niemieckiego, angielskiego, jeszcze innych języków razem. I to powinno wygenerować dosyć dużą ilość dyskusji na temat tego, jak te konkretne poziomy powinny wyglądać, jak te konkretne umiejętności powinny na tych poziomach wyglądać. Jeżeli tylko uda nam się dojść do porozumienia na wszystkich poziomach, to Peter przywiezie nam beczkę szampana. Jeżeli dojdziemy do porozumienia i nie będzie żadnych wątpliwości i spornych kwestii. I sugeruję tutaj, Peter, że najlepiej byłoby zacząć już jutro.
Okay. I have a question for you, but I'm going to ask one person. I did actually mention this yesterday to this person when we had a cup of tea together. And Ala, come here. Now, I know from Ala's personality, she doesn't want to come here. She doesn't want, come on, Ala, come here. Come on, please. I would like you to come down. Ala and I have an agreement yesterday over a cup of tea, and I get the feeling very strongly that Ala will tell me exactly the truth. She will. I'm absolutely convinced of this. Ala, the question is, did you feel intimidated by what I did today?
I must admit that not really. I think... Not really. I think that what you have presented shows us that there's something for us to improve and to start a process that perhaps we haven't done, many of us haven't done before. But I think that this can I don't know, that this can help us improve the quality of services that we provide. Although I know that what we provide is high quality work, and I stressed it yesterday, but still, as always, as every institution, there's always room for improvement. So I think that if we join forces and with some enthusiasm, I think that it can work out for the good of all of us. Okay, I'll try. Wydaje mi się, że tak jak każda instytucja, mikrofon do ust, czuję się troszkę niekomfortowo. Tak? Okej. Znaczy, wydaje mi się, że to, co usłyszeliśmy, jakby daje nam obietnicę osiągnięcia pewnej satysfakcjonującej nas wszystkich jakości. Ja jakby podkreślałam to w rozmowie wczorajszej, że jakość pracy, jaką świadczymy w naszym centrum, jest bardzo wysoka i że potrzebujemy jedynie uznania jakiejś zewnętrznej instytucji dla tego, co robimy dobrze od wielu lat. A wiadomo, że w każdej instytucji jest miejsce na jakby podniesienie jakości, więc myślę, że z odrobiną jakby zaangażowania jesteśmy w stanie to osiągnąć.
I have to thank Ala. She did not know that I was going to do this. She had no idea that I would call her down to the front. As you can see, it's not her personality to stand in the front comfortably. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice for all of us, particularly Sarah and myself, to have an authentic, honest, straight comment? I'd just like to say, first of all, thank you to Ala, but through Ala to all of you. I do know that what you do is of high quality. We're talking about improving, moving forward, doing better, improving moving forward and doing better were the words that Maestro Niccolò Copernico gave the world on your behalf. Improving, moving forward, doing better. And he had the courage to do that. You've got the quality. You've just got to show and coordinate it. That's all it is. Okay, it's not easy, but that's all it is. Just to show and coordinate what you do. And thank you very much for inviting us. It's been great fun. And thank you for your questions. Because where you ask questions, you're reflecting. And I'm sorry we had to stop. Yeah, I realize we're 1 hour late and you're 1 hour late. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you all of you.
Okay. Wystąpienie Ali nie było ustalane wcześniej, więc nie spodziewała się zupełnie. I poprosiłem o to, żeby tutaj powiedziała nam, co uważa, ponieważ chciałem usłyszeć uczciwą i bezpośrednią odpowiedź. I ten proces pozwoli nam wprowadzić pewne ulepszenia i zapewnić jakby taką pieczęć położyć na tej wysokiej jakości, którą dostarczamy i udowodnić, że jakby zapewnić, że ta jakość jest i będzie takim certyfikatem, dowodem na to, że ta jakość jest dostarczana. Dziękuję wszystkim za przybycie, za to, że zaprosiliście nas tutaj, że mogliśmy wspólnie na ten temat porozmawiać.
If I may add one more thing. I stressed yesterday that we do hope that this accreditation process can guarantee us institutional support, which we feel we are lacking so far. So perhaps you can confirm that this will be done.
I can't answer that on behalf of your university. Obviously, it would be incorrect. But what I can say is that last night, after we'd had a long day, Sarah and I agreed that in our thank you letter to the university, we would ask politely and suggest gently that some further institutional support is needed to support the excellent teachers who came to listen. Is that clear? And that promise I made you yesterday, I will keep. Believe me. Thank you.
Okay. W liście z podziękowaniami do Uniwersytetu Peter zobowiązał się wspomnieć, że potrzebne jest dalsze wsparcie instytucjonalne procesu, który tutaj został rozpoczęty i dotrzyma swojego słowa.